procure to pay life cycle basically, then the payable process, how payable works in Oracle application, the integration points and the open interfaces. So Oracle Payable is directly connected or is directly dealing with the purchasing activity in the business function as such. So basically, when we talk about the process flow of the Oracle application, the payable is, yes, the payable is integrated with the modules like purchasing, procurement, order management, receivable. Then it is, being a financial module, it is directly connected to the subledger accounting, which is a new feature in Oracle R12, and general ledger. So when we say payable, Oracle payable, basically it is dealing with purchasing and procurement. It is dealing with the asset management. It is dealing with order management. So there are multiple, as everyone knows, there are multiple what you can say as shared entity in Oracle application, like suppliers, items, customers. So when we talk about the integration with other modules, Oracle Payable uses the uh, shared entity for the process of its transactions. So procure to pay life cycle, it always discuss about the purchasing activity. It is divided in three basic part. One is ordering, analysis, and sourcing. The sourcing part is concerned with supplier management, RFQs and quotations, catalog and content management. Ordering process is connected to the requisition, purchase order, receiving of the material, and invoice entry and payment of that invoice. And analysis is basically related to the business intelligence part, wherein we have the different type of reporting, or maybe we can have the supplier performance management. So procure to pay life cycle we can divide into three basic parts, which have the processes of and those processes can be taken can be performed in different modules in Oracle application. So procure to pay in a standard process, or we can say in a standard environment, it always start with a demand. A demand is called as purchase requisition in Oracle application. Once the demand is approved, once the demand is accepted by the authorities or by the organization or by the person who is supposed to approve those demands, we can create, either we can go for the RFQs, that is the quotation process, wherein we will float that RFQ to the multiple suppliers. We can float that RFQ for the uh, entire vendor without giving any specific name, or we can float that RFQ for the limited vendors, right? Those vendors can reply that RFQ by submitting the quotations against those RFQs. Once we receive the quotations from the suppliers, then we can have the quotation analysis. Oracle is not actually giving you any analysis kind of thing. It will give you the report based on some standard functionalities. Then we finalize the supplier. So from this point of time, we start the process called sourcing, wherein we finalize the supplier. Then we discuss the terms and conditions, we discuss the schedules, we discuss the rates, and then we actually uh, what you can say award that particular order to a particular supplier. So we create a purchase order. Against that purchase order, supplier will supply the material at multiple time or in one go. Once we receive the material, we enter the invoices, and then we make the payment of that invoices. Now this entering the invoice and making the payment is the major part that is being taken care by Oracle Payables. There are setups related to the payments, there are processes related to the payment or invoice verification, taxation, everything is taken care in Oracle Payable. So RFQs and quotations, those are not mandatory documents in Oracle application. Basically, those RFQs and quotations start or provide you the data. That is the willingness and the agreement or maybe the offer given by the supplier. So request for quotation is nothing but requesting the supplier, different supplier to provide their rates or their offering about the product or about the services that we are actually intend to purchase or intend to buy or intend to acquire from the market. So once a requisition is created, now in Oracle we can create the requisition by manual process or we can import the requisition from the external sources. And once the requisition is created, it gets approved by the approval process, approval management engine, and such approved requisitions are available for creating the RFQs against them. Okay, in certain cases, if you have the blanket agreement or if you have the proper agreement in place in application, based on the sourcing rules, which is the part and parcel of Oracle purchasing process, based on the sourcing rules, system generates or creates a purchase order using the requisition directly. So it can create the releases, it can create the standard purchase based on the sourcing rule. When we generate the RFQs, what we do? In RFQ, we attach the list of suppliers that I want to float this particular RFQ, or I want those suppliers should submit the quotations against those RFQs. So we attach the list of suppliers to the RFQs, and those supplier in turn submits their quotation against it. Based on the criteria of the organization, we award that purchase order to the particular supplier. Now in Oracle purchasing, this is something related to the purchase business process flow, wherein a demand is called as requisition in Oracle, which can be generated or which can be created through different business processes in the application or through business processes of the organization. Like a requisition can be generated through inventory setups. So you might have minimum quantity, on-hand quantity, maximum on-hand quantity setup properly done. You have the planning engine which is working in the application or which is set up for that particular item, and based on the stock levels or based on the replenishment method which we define, system generate a requisition for that item. From WIP, this WIP is nothing but the process for used for the manufacturing material. So WIP, when we create a job card for a particular item, system checks the material availability, and if the material is not available, system generates a purchase order or a requisition for that material. Or if there are certain items or there are certain services that are to be procured or that are to be processed outside the or outside processing kind of thing, in that case also system generate a requisition for that item. Planning, material and resource planning, based on the planning method, system generate the requisition. Through order management for the internal sales orders, or maybe for the back-to-back order, drop shipment kind of order, or the material which is not available, for that also system generates a requisition. And from other system, that is from the legacy. Now these are not only integrations. There are projects which are playing part in that. There might be a HRMS which will be playing part in creating the requisitions for different requirement. Once the requisition is created, only creation of the requisition is not sufficient. We need to get it approved before we create a sales order, a purchase order. So unless and until we approve the requisition, the system will not create any document against that requisition. Okay. So supplier is a shared entity. A simple definition of the supplier is the entity which supplies us or which provides us the services. So we purchase or procure the material from the supplier. So supplier is being used on purchase requisition. Supplier is being used on quotations or RFQs. Supplier is referred on purchase order. Now on purchase requisition, it is not a mandatory requirement, because a person who is creating the purchase requisition may or may not aware from whom we should purchase. So that particular requirement is not mandatory on purchase requisition. But for other documents like for quotations, purchase orders, receipt, return, and payment, supplier is mandatory. Purchase order, we create the purchase order against the purchase requisition, or we create the purchase order against directly without any requisition. So we can create the purchase order manually, or we can create the purchase order using automatic document creation. When we create the purchase order using automatic document creation, we have the reference of the purchase requisitions. So we can pick up the requisition from the requisition pool, or else we can create a manual purchase order. When we say purchase order, Oracle system maintains the data related to the document. So it maintains the data related to any change. It maintains the data related to the versions. It maintains the data related to the schedules. It maintains the data related to the acceptance of the customers. It maintains the data related to different controls related to maybe payments, controls related to the supply of the material, other terms and conditions, right? We use that purchase order to receive the material against the purchase order. And similarly, we use that purchase order for the matching of the invoice. A matching is the process in payables. We will be discussing this thoroughly in the payable training. Material receipt in Oracle, material receipt is, there are three types of material receipt. One is direct receipt, standard receipt, and inspection receipt. So in case of direct receipt, we normally call it as expense items, wherein we receive the material directly on the shop floor, or we receive the material directly to the expense sub inventory. We can receive the material, have the visual inspection, and then transfer the material to the related go down or maybe the related location, and then we receive the material, have the quality inspection in properly done, and then transfer it to the inventory organization. I will not empathize on the receiving process at this point of time, because that is the part and parcel of the Oracle purchasing. Now invoicing. Once the material is received, once the material is item is received against the purchase order, we can enter the invoice manually, or we can set up the system in such a way that system can generate the invoice directly using a process. So we can import the invoice, or we can enter the invoice in the system. We enter the basic information, and we can enter the detailed information about the system. Now there are certain items wherein we are not creating any maybe the receipt, like the service item, wherein those items are called as non-stockable in Oracle inventory. So there will not be any receipt as such for the service item. Like I have taken the consultancy from the advocate, I cannot create the receipt for that. So in such cases, for those are called as expense item. In such cases, I can create enter the invoice directly using the purchase order reference. So while entering the invoice in payables, I will refer the purchase order. So purchase order will have the reference of the invoices and invoice vice versa. Then once the invoices are entered into the payable system, we match those invoice. System will check whether the prices are correct, whether the terms and conditions mentioned over there are correct, if there is any tax which is actually applicable for that invoice. So system actually validate that invoice against the purchase orders, terms and conditions, items, everything. In payables, we maintain the invoices. Maintaining of the invoice means we maintain the data of the invoice, we maintain the track, we maintain the history of that invoice in the application, which help us to basically understand who has done what, whether the invoice is approved or not, whether the invoice is paid or not. So we can check the status of the invoice. Okay. Then it comes to the payment. We can have the different type of payments or mode of payments in Oracle. Oracle provides you the different modes of payment. We can have the check payment, we can have the NEFT or the electronic transfer. So system provides you all the processes that will require to transfer the money or to pay the money to the supplier. So we basically select the validated invoices, we check whether that particular invoice is applicable for the making the payment. And there are two processes. One, we can pay individual invoice by creating a single payment. Okay, and we can run the pay run wherein system will check all the eligible invoices and select those invoices in a batch, and from there we can make the payments. So when we say discuss about the payables payments, so we can Oracle Payable maintains the data related to the suppliers. We import the invoices or we can enter the invoices. Importing of the invoice means we can import the invoice from the purchasing application. So even though that is the Oracle application itself, we need to run the import program for that, or we can directly enter the invoice in payables. We validate that invoice. Validation of the invoice is the process wherein actual system will check whether the terms and conditions as per the purchase order are matching or not, whether that supplier is supposed to supply that material or not, or if there is any purchase order available or not, right? Once the validation process is done, we release that invoice for the making the payment. And once the payment is done, we create the accounting of that particular invoice through subledger, and then we transfer that invoice or that entry to the GL. Oracle Payables manages the supplier entry. So supplier entry, we enter the supplier related data, like we enter the name of the supplier, we create the enter the data related to the taxation of that supplier. So maybe tax number in Indian context, we enter the tax different tax numbers, maybe GST number or income tax number. Then we enter the locations of that supplier, we enter the contact person details of that supplier. So we enter the credit period, we enter the currency in which we want to make the payments to that supplier. So all the supplier data is maintained in payables, right? In invoice, when we talk about the invoice entry, Oracle provides you two types of invoices. One is it imports the invoice from the other modules. So maybe if you are purchasing the material from the vendor, then by running the import invoice process, system generates a payable invoice. In some cases, even though there is no purchasing, or maybe you can purchase service material, so you have service procurement contracts in place. From there also you can import the invoices, or some customers can go for the another legacy system from where in which they are maintaining the purchasing related data. In payables, in payment, we create the single entry payment, or we can create the multiple payments in one go. So we create the batch. So integration. Oracle Payable is basically integrated with asset management. It is integrated with the projects. It is integrated with the procurement or procurement, receivables, loans, cash management, e-commerce gateway, suppliers, and payment. It is also integrated with HRMS, human resource management, subledger accounting, GL, workflows, property manager, inventory, e-business tax, expenses, and alerts, right? So when we talk about the integration with the purchasing, uh, in purchasing, what we do? In purchasing, we enter the purchase orders, right? So purchase orders will provide you the data related to the item. So it provides the data from whom to purchase, what to purchase, at what rate we to purchase, and what quantity is to be purchased. In addition to that, it provides you the terms and conditions applicable for that particular purchase order. So payable refer those purchase order and match the invoices. It updates the billed quantity in purchasing. Okay. Then in APAR netting, wherein there are many suppliers who are customers to us also, right? So one supplier is our customer and is our supplier. So in that case, we use the APAR netting kind of thing. So in that case, receivable will provide you the amount that is supposed to be received from that particular supplier, and payable will actually net off that amount and then provide you the balance amount for payment. Loans, basically Oracle Loans is a different module altogether, wherein we can have the EMIs and everything set up for the supplier. Cash flow data. So cash management provides you the reconciliation of the payments. It provides or it stores the data related to the banks, bank code, bank branches, or different payment methods. E-commerce gateway is basically used for the online shopping, wherein we have Oracle has provided certain codes for the outbound payment, inbound invoices, outbound application advices, and billing notices. That is advanced supply and bill notice. iSupplier portal. iSupplier portal is basically used for the by the supplier, wherein supplier will have certain authority or will have certain access of the data, wherein he can enter data on behalf of us, right? So supplier can check whether what is the current status of my receipt or my supplies, what is the current status of my invoices. He will enter certain data related to the deliveries which he want he's planning to send. So certain data can be managed by the supplier. Those that data will not directly come into the application unless and until a person or the authorized person from the organization approves that or accept that data for you. Payment is a different module altogether, wherein we have the payment methods and payment documents which we maintain, and we actually run the payment pay run to process the multiple payments under one payment in advice. Asset. Payable is directly connected with the asset for the financial asset management, wherein we actually enter the mass additions. We enter the uh, we post that mass addition to the asset management. So that is being taken care by FA, financial asset management. Oracle projects is again connected to the payables, because in some cases wherein you have the project in place, you have the projects in place, and through project based on the certain criteria, system generates the payments, right? HRMS is basically taking care for the locations, employees, or the organization related data. So that is the basic module which actually help us to process the data.